Welcome to the reality show. We are discussing, the only topic that we are discussing on the channel nowadays, which is the war in Israel. I'm here with John Wass, Robert Nasser, Michael Liebowitz. So today we'll be discussing the way or one particular aspect of the way the news organizations particularly in the UK and I think in the US to some extent, cover this topic, and specifically the fact that they uh, often use the word militants rather than the word terrorists. They don't want to call terrorists, and we'll talk about why that is and what that means about how, to what extent you can actually trust them as news sources if they can't call a spade a spade. And we'll also, before that, actually, right now, we'll talk about the so-called protests, or what they actually are, the celebrations that we've seen in the streets of London, of New York, of San Francisco, of many cities, people going out from Saturday night onwards, uh, essentially celebrating. There's no other way to put this. Celebrate. Why are they going out just now and doing this in the street? Celebrating what Hamas has done, celebrating the fact that Israel was caught off guard, celebrating the fact that men, women, and children, all ages, have been slaughtered in their homes, in a rave, in every place where Hamas could get their hands on them. Michael, your thoughts on this?
Oh, wow. Starting with me, huh? This is aggravating the hell out of me, to be honest. Many years ago, I was very, very consumed with what was going on in Israel, with the history of the country of Israel, with the wars, everything. And I was Jewish. I was practicing Judaism at the time. I was going to my Jewish service. Once I became an atheist, I kind of lost interest in what was happening over there. Partly because I was an atheist, but also partly because I didn't, and I still don't. I don't believe that the United States government should be giving foreign aid to anybody, Israel or anybody else. That said, what I've seen over the last few days on social media, the protests that you're talking about, it's disgusting, yes, but it's also completely divorced from reality. One of the biggest problems, if not the biggest problems that I see, is the lack of historical understanding of the territory. People, like I saw on Facebook today or Twitter, one of them, the Jews stole the land from the Palestinians. Never mind that there was never a self-governing country called Palestine, ever in the history of the planet. Never. It's always been governed by one empire or the other, subsequent to the Jews having it before the Romans took it over. But people don't seem to grasp that. They also don't grasp that the initial 1948 settlement called for a two-state solution, where the Jews would have half of the area and the Palestinians would have half the area. But the Arabs wouldn't go for that, so they invaded. That in the meantime, they also told the Palestinians, leave your homes. You can go back once we drive the Jews into the ocean. And obviously that's not what happened. They got their asses kicked. And that's the root of the refugees. People don't get that. And all we see is a bunch of idiots. I don't know what else to call them. They're just dumb human beings. And I wonder how many of them, because a lot of them are young, if they only knew how much they're going to regret this later in their lives, that they took such an evil stand in calling for a moral equivalence or even a moral superiority of Hamas. It's dumbfounding to me, and it's really aggravating the hell out of me, to be honest.
I hope you're right. I hope these kids will grow up to be decent human beings. We know somebody who was of the very far left, who appeared on this channel many times and will appear many times more. Who thought about it as an adult and moved away from that. but I don't know. I mean, just getting to where they are, even as a young adult, requires some sort of some sort of set of ideas that leads you there. And you mentioned that you are against foreign aid, but that is, I guess, a principal statement about or position about the nature of government and what it should and shouldn't do. Those, if we're going to call them protesters, are not protesting foreign aid because they
No.
think no, they're protesting. If we were going to call it a protest, they're protesting Jews being alive and celebrating the fact that fewer. John, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have to echo Michael on this. They just sound like absolute idiots, especially on a moral level. It takes a whole lot of moral equivalency to see things the way they do and celebrate this type of thing. And it's not only about, or I should say, it's also about the fact that they have all these twisted package deal concepts, like they don't know what an occupied territory really is. They think that they don't know what self-defense is. It's just, they've twisted the definitions of all these words so badly that they've justified in their mind true evil. It's absolutely disgusting. And I blame the universities and the media, but ultimately altruism. It all rests on that, because moral certainty is frowned upon in altruism. And so they want to rebel against that moral certainty that Israel has in their right to defend themselves. And they're doing it in a way they think is moral, but is completely irrational.
Robert, your thoughts on the protests? You are muted, although I don't see the mute button on, but I can't hear you.
The audio.
All right, how about that?
Yep.
Okay. Obviously, I agree with Michael. I agree with John. They're absolutely right. And I am similarly outraged. But what this says about the people protesting is that they don't understand. They don't know what's going on in the Middle East. They do not understand the situation. That narrative that the Palestinians are a displaced people, they've been brutally oppressed for over 7 decades. They accept that as the truth, and not blindly. They're not just idiots and they believe everything their college professors have said. These are the ideas that are out there. This is the narrative, and it's backed up by all sorts of information, quote unquote information, leaving the good stuff out. But even more than that, backed up by the philosophic ideas that they hold, by this subjectivism that says, well, there's an argument, 2 sides, they need to negotiate, Netanyahu would say, or they need to realize that nobody's fully right and fully wrong. This ultimately is a philosophical issue, and I see that in the protests. It's easy to look at the videos of these crazy people in the streets holding these horrible Palestinian flags and saying the worst conceivable things, acting like not even metaphorical, but literal Nazis. But what do they believe to make them do those things? I'm almost getting to the point where I'm sick of my own anger, and now I want to know what the hell is going on. These people really believe this stuff. The narrative, the idea, they do not understand the situation. They believe the simplistic narrative. That's what I see going on out there. Because these people who are protesting, these kids, these college kids, outside of this context, you would see them working the cash register at your local Target or serving you a coffee as a barista, and you would say, oh yeah, they're just people. They're just normal people. But what does it take for normal people to say these evil, horrible things? It's because they believe what they believe. They believe these ideas, and they believe this narrative, this notion of what the history of the Middle East is. And that's why half of our job aside from expressing our unequivocal moral condemnation, is going to be to get both the ideas and the facts out there, the facts and the values out there.
So earlier on the Daily Objective, I said we will, we will try to update people on what is actually going on as well. And one of the updates was that there were drones flying in from southern Lebanon. So I was just looking at the news, and the IDF has announced that that was an error. So there were no drones. There were sirens all over the north of Israel. But that didn't happen. So that's an update that we have now on the situation, and of course we'll keep updating on anything that happens, certainly while we're on the air.
Yeah, we've all been following the news, but I really appreciate the ARCUK being ahead of that. You can take it in raw from the different news sources, or you can take an intelligent reading of it. And Razi, what you've decided to do, including postponing other shows that are not related to the news, including mine, I appreciate that. I appreciate the ARCUK is doing that. And I'm not the only one. Just to point out a couple super chats here, because Bonnie, regular supporter and intellectual Bonnie Bertrand, is in with a super chat and says, Razi is indefatigable. And Razi, I see that you are not fatigued by this. You are not stopping. She says, thank you for all that you do. I hope all of us on the channel can follow your lead. I know some of us, James describes it as post-traumatic stress syndrome. He's exaggerating a little, but not by much. It's very difficult to contain our emotions. Equal to reality, thank you, is also in with 5 pounds and says, there are no words to describe my fury at the situation. Anyone who backs Hamas or thinks there is moral equivalence is either stupid or evil. Thank you for that. I agree with it. I got to throw ideas in the mix. We'll talk more about that. Jonathan Honig, very big super chat, and says, thank you for your moral clarity on this issue. Thank you, Jonathan, for that. Evil Tiki 13 YouTube user is in with €5.99. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate your support. And another super sticker in with Jonathan Honig. More support for the ARCK. Folks, I mentioned earlier with James, we're not doing fundraisers here. We're not trying to bring in money, but maybe we should. Your money is supporting this effort just to keep all of us sane, to get the information out there, to show the ne'er-do-wells we are not going to sit down. We are not going to keep silent. We are going to fight. So thank you to the super chatters. Sorry about that little break there, but that's real important to me. I love to see the support.
Yeah, I appreciate the support and I appreciate the compliments. And I will say, yeah, we will actually do a little bit of fundraising, not for us today, although usually the fundraising we do is for us. But there is, where we can, I think, we'll encourage people to help people in Israel. So I'll get to that soon. Just a quick comment on, shows being basically put on hold. I think, and like, I would understand if people told me, actually, I have heard this, a friend of mine said, you give descriptions of the videos you see, I can't watch the shows. I understand that. I understand people, hopefully anybody we lose temporarily and not permanently, and you'll come back when we can have more positive content. And as I mentioned, I hope Israel surprises me and does what needs to be done quickly, and we can have that positive content back soon. So the comparison to the Nazis has been made, and I think rightfully so recently, because the images, those of us who have seen the videos and those of us who have heard what is in those videos, you actually see Hamas terrorists behaving like Nazis. The stories of just slaughtering all those people in the rave, and then raping women right next to the dead bodies of their friends, and killing babies, taking children and parading bodies. That is very much Nazi-like behavior. And back to the celebrations in the street, it's not just the celebrations in the street. So in London, there has been, as there always is when there is a round of fighting in the Middle East, there have been attacks on Jews. There have been anti-Semitic attacks on Jewish businesses and so on. So Michael, I want to go back to you with this, with considering your time as a practicing Jew, and sort of how you look at it now, how you would have looked at it then, on this, these attacks on Jews, and the fact that this idea of we're just opposing Israel because of their policies. I think that lie is no longer something that people are going to buy.
Yeah, look, I think that I would probably oppose a lot of Israel's policies as well. I oppose a lot of America's policies. The problem comes, I think, with a lot of this stuff is where there's a the Jesus in the Bible, for instance, says, "He who has not sinned cast the first stone." And a lot of people take that to mean that all sins are equal, right? So if you've ever run a traffic light, then you have no right to condemn a murderer, for instance. So people will look, well, Israel did this, Israel did this. Israel is not launching attacks to intentionally harm civilians. They're not brutalizing civilians. They don't celebrate the deaths of the people they don't like. They are not morally equivalent to Hamas. And part of it is that people, a lot of people are condemning it and they speak in moral terms, but they have no moral theory that they're relying on. It's just they think this, and that's all there is to it. I'm really, one of my biggest, I don't know if it's a flaw, maybe it is. I have a really difficult time dealing with unreasonable people. Even in my personal relationships, I can deal with disagreement, arguments, whatever. But when I feel like the person with whom I'm communicating isn't playing by the laws of reason, the laws of logic, it frustrates me. And these people are just so unreasonable. I just don't know what to do. I don't know how you reach them, how you can cause that shift in their ideas. I think it has to be done. I mean, you can't give up the fight of ideas because there's a lot of irrational people, but it's still a challenge. I mean, what do you do? How do you solve that? And I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question, because you want to fight the battle of ideas, by talking, by arguing, by making rational arguments to people who will then say, okay, you know what, I maybe I'm not fully convinced, but you're challenging my views, and I'll consider what you're saying. I don't see myself going out when these people are protesting in the streets of London and trying to have a conversation with one of them, in part because emotionally I couldn't handle it. I despise them so much that I don't want to talk to these people. But also, I don't think if I could calm myself down enough to try to reason with them, I can't imagine it being successful. John, your thoughts on this? Are you still with us, John?
Yeah, I am, but can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. I
Okay.
can't see you.
Yeah, my Zoom is crashing apparently. So if I disappear, I'll try and get back in. But so yeah, I don't think there is much reasoning to be done with some of these people. They're literally like the drooling beast from the Fountainhead. There was one, as an example, one guy on Facebook today was saying that the story about the babies being killed was just Zionist propaganda, and anyone who believes it just wants to commit genocide on the Palestinians or something. So there is no reasoning with someone like that. They're gone. They are as evil as the terrorists, in my opinion. And I don't know what you do about that, other than just avoid them as much as possible, I guess. But there's just so much bad propaganda out there right now in the media. I saw 2 horrible articles in the Guardian, actually, earlier when I was looking around, that just fuel this kind of stuff. One of the articles particularly, she was arguing that this is all bad, what Hamas is doing, not because of the rape and terror and, that's all bad and everything, but the real problem is it's going to fuel militant Zionism. That's the real problem. So, and that's in the Guardian. Her article is terrible. it's that kind of stuff that fuels this pure rationality, in my opinion.
Yeah, normally, I read The Guardian a lot in part because we have that segment, The Guardian says the darndest things, and it's that there's a lot of material to make fun of with The Guardian, but yeah, it is. It's moments like these where you stop laughing and you realize how despicable they really are. And the people arguing genocide. It's interesting to see people who are arguing that Israel wants to commit genocide because Israel has the military capabilities to do that. Let's put it that way. We've been hearing this for decades. The genocide has yet to happen. Yet the Palestinians, what Hamas did is all that they could have done here. So the numbers, when we compare it to the Nazis, the numbers are not similar to the numbers in the Holocaust because they don't have the capabilities, not because they don't have the will, because that is very much what they would like to do. They would absolutely kill every last Jew in Israel if they had the capabilities to do that. And I think they
absolutely
where they're going with this remains to be seen. I think again, like we haven't seen the end of this.
Well, it reminds me of the quote, I think by Netanyahu, but it could be someone else, that if he said something.
We just lost John, but I know what quote he's going for there.
And do you? I'm thinking it's a Golda Meir quote, but Robert, do you want to give that quote, and then we'll see if you were right when John is back.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of super chats I've got to read too, but I think everybody understands, and that's why it's such a powerful idea. If the Palestinians, if the opponents of Israel laid down their arms, there would be peace. And if Israel laid down its arms, there would be no more Israel. And we all know that that's true. Even the people who hate Israel know that that is true. I got to give a shout out real quick. Ashley Shrugged is in with a super chat. Thank you for your support. Means a lot, not just to supporting the ARCUK, but giving all of us a little more energy, a little more fuel, knowing that there are kindred spirits. And that gets to the question of, well, why do we fight if people are obstinate, they don't listen, they don't believe, they don't learn? I've got some answers to that. But also Phil is in with 10 pounds. Thank you for your support. And says, I see a subliminal tribalism connection between the nihilism of support for Hamas and the ideology of climate catastrophism. Different subjects, but the same people or types. And then he asks, am I wrong? Y'all might have some answers to that. We can get into that. But real quick, Gail Parker is also in with a support for us. Thank you for that $4.99. And she says, well, exactly, Michael, going back to what Michael was saying, by discussing with reason, we are assuming the other party will use reason to consider what we're saying. Gail, you're right. And Michael, you're right. But we don't talk to crazy people to convince crazy people, especially not on the internet. Consider what happens on a debate stage. You have never seen a debate where the other side said, oh my God, that's such a great art. I'm wrong. I agree with you now. No, that's not the point of a debate. The point of a debate is to bring the best ideas to bear in front of an audience. And as far as your opponent goes, you're not trying to change his mind. You're only trying to plant seeds. And that's what you're doing in the minds of your audience. If there is anybody out there who is open to reason, we probably won't convince them either, but you will give them something to think about. You will move them in the right direction. It's why the voices on the ARCUK are so important. And they're not going to be measured by how many people say, you guys changed my life. We've got some of those stories, but the important thing is to get that out. Now, there are 10 other reasons to have a debate or a conversation on the internet, and I could name all 10 of them, including you don't change the opponent's mind, but you let him know there is serious opposition out there. You let him know there are serious ideas out there. We, in particular, let people know the ideas of Ayn Rand are out there. There are many reasons to keep this conversation going, even if nobody ever says, this conversation changed my mind. No, the impact is out there. Speaking of impact, Tom, thank you. $10 in a super chat. That's awesome. We appreciate the support. And Tom says, thanks for the coverage. Again, Razi, to your project for the channel this week, or however long this goes on. Thank you for that.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the super chats. I want to try to address Phil's question. So I I definitely think fundamentally, philosophically, these ideas are similar. And even in practice, both sides, their ideas applied to humanity would bring in mass death and mass suffering. I don't want to, it makes me sick to just think of trying to defend anybody who's advocating for either of those ideas. But I can see people, I can imagine people who actually think, especially young people, who actually think, they've been terrified by the parents. The parents have been telling them how the world is about to end, and they're scared, and they think, something should be done. And generally, young people, can get away with a lot more than an adult can. Now, if it's a young person who is seeing the videos of what Hamas is doing and tries to kind of make some excuse for that, I don't put that on the same. Just off the top of my head, I don't put that in the same category as a young person saying, well, the world is going to end. That's what the adults have been telling me since I was born. So I want people to stop doing what is bringing the world to an end. That is my answer, again, off the top of my head. Michael, your thoughts on this?
I actually have a few thoughts. One, to Robert's point from earlier, is, Robert, I agree with you 100%. And thank you for reminding me that when you have a debate with somebody, the point isn't to convince them, it's to put ideas out there. And that's a big reason why I, to a certain extent, disagree with a lot of objectivists who talk about not engaging irrational people because of the sanction you give them. Because sometimes they have an audience where everybody in that audience might not be irrational, and you might be able to reach them. Razi, I'm with you on this about this. Part of the problem here is sloppy language, I think, because when you accuse your intellectual opponents always of evil or bad intent, as a lot of people do in relation to the environmental movement, when you say they just want to destroy the world, for instance, and then Hamas, who that actually is their intent, comes up, well, now someone says, well, what's the difference? Well, the difference is, by and large, people that are environmentalists think they're right. I happen to think they're wrong in many, many cases, but their intent is actually to do good. Hamas is just evil, right? They're actually beheading people. They want death. They think that if they wipe out their enemies, they're going to go to a special place in heaven. Whereas somebody that thinks that global warming is going to destroy the world wants a better world. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So that's why for me, it's important to be careful and not get into that sort of always ascribing evil intent to people that disagree with me for that very reason, because I think it's obvious, to me at least, that Hamas and Greenpeace are not the same thing.
Robert?
Yeah, it's a fair point to make. And I would address that whole topic by sharing. We just got another super chat in from Larry Green. Thank you. Generous super chat, $10. And Larry says, America and Israel's number one enemy is an idea, a tremendously crippling idea. That idea is the evil, immoral morality of altruism, i.e. sacrifice. Larry, I agree with you, except in this particular case, even more than a lot of others, I've got to throw irrationality into the mix, because you can say, well, altruism implies irrationality. But as other commentators had pointed out, outside of objectivism, if you take the irrationality and specifically take the religion out of the mix, out of this conflict, still a difficult conflict, but at least has solutions. Throw the irrationality into the mix and you get what we've got today. Because this isn't just a fight over a piece of land, it's a fight over homelands. It just makes the challenge that much more difficult, or the problem that much more intractable. So I agree with you, Larry, but I've got to add, this one's got both. It's got both irrationality and amoralism, altruism, self-sacrifice, and reinforces my own belief that this is, now that it's a battle of mortars and bullets, it still remains a battle of ideas.
So a couple of things. So John, I guess his Zoom crashed and he's not with us now, but if you are watching and you want to put that quote in the chat so we know if Robert got the right one, then please go ahead. Yeah, so I mentioned yesterday as well that we will see if there are ways that we can help support people in Israel who are or now there are different ways we can support different people. One of the things that the Ayn Rand Center UK is doing in the UK is we've asked people who might be able to offer a room or a sofa for anybody who needs to get out of Israel for whatever reason, and I think we might have a few people like that. Another thing is Boaz Arad of the Ayn Rand Center Israel, who has been on this channel a few times, including this past Saturday. So he runs a project called Atlas Juniors, which is a project for promising students, I believe teenagers, in the city of Ashkelon, which I mentioned earlier on the Daily Objective. There are terrorists on the loose there. I don't have an update on that, but so there's a school there. They're planning a retreat for the students there next week, far away from, well, not far away enough, I would say, but far away from the Gaza area. There's a link in the live chat if you want to help support that project. I believe, although don't 100% take my word for this, you can check this hopefully, but I believe this is tax deductible in the UK and the US, contributions to this, so you can click that link and contribute to that retreat next week. Any final thoughts on this topic of the protests, Michael?
Not really. I mean, I'm so exhausted with it. The protesters, yes, but just all the bad things that are coming out and inaccurate things that are coming out of people's mouths and being typed into their computers. It's just get your facts straight. You know what I mean? It's just, you just don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that by the way, that would be the generous interpretation. The less generous is they absolutely know what they're talking about, and yet they advocate for this. Robert, any thoughts on this before we go to the next topic?
Yeah, absolutely. First, thank you to Apollo Zeus, A to Z, £2. Appreciate your support. Another super chat. The question was asked by our producer. Well, a few weeks ago, you had the greater reporting on lesser issues. Way back when we had the Unite the Right rally a few years ago, they dominated the news headlines. Where are these protests? I mean, sure, our right-leaning media are willing to go to Australia or the UK and point out, look at these crazy Palestinian supporters, but where is the mainstream press? And why aren't just people in general concerned about this? And people in general, they don't understand the situation. They do believe that simplistic narrative that, there are crimes on both sides and the Palestinians were thrown out of their homes, and they believe the simplistic narrative. We need to condemn the terrorists unequivocally, but we also need to provide better answers to those protesters. I don't mean the crazies. I mean, well, they're crazy, but the college students, the people that we know, people that we work with. The failure isn't ours, but we do need to do better in order to fight both the ideological and the information or misinformation battle. And again, that's what we're doing here, but that is my take on it. I would be completely demoralized if I believed that everybody who is engaged in these protests or is on that side of the conversation is unequivocally evil. But I have all the evidence in the world to say, no, that's not true. Now, some of them are, but these college kids, no, they're simply not simply, but most of what's going on there, they're just wrong. They're just wrong. They're wrong in their philosophy. They're wrong in their premises. They're wrong in their understanding of history. They got to be straightened out, but they're not completely evil. So some of them, at least, can be reached.
Yeah, and I said we're going to the next topic, but actually I forgot that I wanted to bring this up. And speaking of evil, so I don't know if you guys saw this. BLM Chicago posted this cartoon on Twitter. I stand with Palestine, and there is a paraglider with a PLO flag. Now the paragliders are this is the first time we've seen paragliders among any of the Palestinian organizations. All they did was go there and slaughter people, as I mentioned, in their homes, in their cars, in the rave, wherever they could find them. Yeah, any thoughts on this by either of you?
I do, yeah. I think it's very rich that Black Lives Matter. For anybody that hasn't actually read their charter or whatever, their mission statement, they're far beyond just an organization that is about Black lives. They talk about intersectionalities and very big defenders of LGBTQ or, whatever else is added to that. And they want to get rid of the nuclear family, for instance. And I would, well, I'm not going to say I'd love to see it, but anybody that knows anything about Hamas, how do these Black Lives Matter people think they'd be received on the Gaza Strip if they went over there touting their advocacy for the LGBT community and getting rid of the traditional family? They could say I'm pro Hamas all they want. They tout that stuff and they're going to meet with a very brutal end. And I don't know if it's because of ignorance, evil, or what, but I just know it's absolutely absurd.
Yeah. There's some organization also called Gays for Palestine, and that's not to be confused with Gays in Palestine, which is just bodies, because they get executed. So it's I don't know how what these people say to themselves to convince themselves that they're right. We have John back. John, do you want to complete that quote?
Oh, yeah, I got cut off. I don't know how much I said, but it was just what you said reminded me of the quote, I think by Netanyahu, I'm not sure, that he said that if Palestine put its weapons down today, the violence and war would end today. But if Israel put its weapons down today, then Israel would end today. So that's not verbatim or anything.
So Robert wins the prize for guessing what quote you started.
Yeah, oh good, he won.
Now, John, did you see this Black Lives Matter Chicago cartoon of the paraglider? And do you have any thoughts on it?
I have seen that. Someone shared it on Facebook. And that's honestly, I can't say very surprising, but it's disgusting.
Robert, any real last thoughts on this time? Because then we will go to our last topic, which, by the way, I will need help on because I'm not watching the news from any channel that isn't Israeli.
I always look for the bright side. So when BLM Chicago put out that tweet with that horrific graphic suggesting that hooray for these parachuters, these bastards coming down with guns and shooting people, I thought, well, that's BLM Chicago. There's dozens of BLM chapters. So naturally, I looked it up. Well, not everybody is posting that particular graphic. Not everybody is that heinous, but it's pretty damn close. If you go looking for the news out there, unfortunately, you're going to find support for the Palestinians, even if it's not as overstated as that by, for example, BLM Grassroots, which is a chapter overseeing several different BLM groups. So, yeah, it is just as bad as you think it is, just as disgusting as you think it is. It's no surprise that the organizers of Black Lives Matter, which I regard as a racist organization, would be exactly the kind of people who have swallowed the Middle East narrative that's been fed to them for years that the Palestinians are a displaced people and the Israelis are keeping them down. But yes, it is fully as disgusting as you think it is.
Okay, and now we will move on to the second topic. It's a different type of disgusting that is going on here, which is the way the media, and it probably feeds into the ease with which people end up, protesting and end up with the views that they have. Some media outlets don't use the word terrorist, and they don't use the word terrorist about Hamas, when they fire rockets, but now they're not using the word terrorist when they go and shoot people point blank, civilians, like go door to door and kill anybody they can and everybody they can see. Robert, I'm going to go to you first with this to ask if there's any other specific details on this that I'm missing, specifically on this these past few days, and your thoughts on it.
So I missed the first part of the question there because I was reading something from the chat. Sorry about that. What was the question again?
So the reporting where some news outlets don't use the word terrorist, they use the word militant.
Right. Yeah, I definitely have something to say about that.
Yeah, can you just give us some more details, because again, I don't have enough of the context, having avoided news channels outside of Israel for the last few days.
Yeah. The BBC has avoided using the word terrorists on the premise that if they're going to report objectively, they should not be judging one side of the debate or the other. They'll describe them as militants, but terrorist implies a more, well, sorry, I shouldn't get into my evaluation yet. So a former reporter, John Sopel, he said in response to John Simpson, describe them as terrorists would be, it would be partial and it would be taking sides. This is another one that infuriates me because impartial means something, but so does terrorist. These words have objective definitions. Hamas fits the definition. It would not be impartial to avoid calling a terrorist a terrorist. I mean, I suppose if they went in there seething and in anger, but no, it's the word that describes, and there is, the UN has an objective definition of what a terrorist is, and Hamas fits it. I'm sorry, I was supposed to be telling you more about the story, but that's the bottom line, is the BBC has refused to call the terrorists terrorists. And it makes them morally culpable on some level for what it is that they refuse to report. This isn't some story that's too graphic for people and they don't want to put it in the news. This is the news of the day. And to refuse to use the words that objectively describe what is happening, at best, it's malpractice in journalism. Sorry, this one's got me going. Real quick here, and I don't mean to change the subject, but I want to get these before we go too far away from when they were said. Phil is in with a very generous 50 pounds. Thank you for that. And says, I trust you, Razi, to find the right recipients for justified benevolence. Please put this towards it. Thanks for what you do. Very generous contribution. And I trust, too, that Razi will know exactly where those resources will be best used. So thank you for that, Phil. And Evil Tiki is in again with another €5.99 and says, why the preference for the term terrorist over soldier? I think they should be called soldiers because they take orders from Hamas. See, now you're going to get me going there. That's might be why your screen name is Evil Tiki. These are not soldiers. The word soldier almost has a certain honor to it. People with a justified or at least understandable motivation who are acting in the way that, for example, the international war courts would deem something more than terrorism. But that is all these people are. All you have got to do is read the news accounts of what has been happening. We're not just talking, as bad as it is, about killing people. This is slaughter. This is chopping off heads, and not of militants, but of children. This is raping women and then using that as a way to get at your enemy. This is the taking of hostages, and not military hostages. We're not talking prison camps. We're talking civilian hostages to be used in who knows what ways, but certainly at a minimum, the worst kind of hostage negotiations. These people are not soldiers, not in any sense that that word has even the smallest implication of honor at all. These are terrorists. This is an of terrorists. By the definition of the word terror, they don't function in a way that is military. They function in a way that is to inspire and provoke and create the maximum amount of terror in their opposition. They are trying, you can't think of a lower way to fight. Read the war crimes in World War II. That is what these people are doing. They are not trying to kill enough of the enemy to convince them to change. They are trying to terrorize enough of the enemy.
John, your thoughts on the reporting and on the question about calling them soldiers?
Yeah, they're terrorists, pure and simple. They're indiscriminate about their killing with the goal of spreading terror. Like, I don't understand what's so complicated about that. The guy that argues for not calling them terrorists, said that, quote, the BBC's job is to place the facts before its audience and let them decide what they think, honestly and without ranting. So facts are these, the facts are that these are terrorists, first of all, and aren't you withholding facts by not revealing that fact? I don't know. And how does not calling them terrorists, or how does calling them terrorists prevent other people from making up their mind? There's plenty of protests all over the world with people who are fully fine with calling them terrorists and yet support them. And how is it a rant? What is ranting about that? Like, that's the stupidest point of this whole thing, is we don't want to rant on our site. It's just for objective truths. Well, it sounds like you're trying to smuggle in something when you don't want to call something what it is.
Michael.
Well, while I think the word terrorism or terrorist has objective meaning, I think that that objective meaning does carry moral implications. What I wonder, though, so if they were down the line, a news organization said, we're not going to bring any moral terms into our reporting, I would understand it. But I would like to know what the BBC said on January 6th when the Trump supporters went into the Capitol. Did they call them protesters? Did they call them insurrectionists? You know, like you see people protesting on the street. Are they protesters or are they rioters? And if they always avoid the terms with the moral implication, then I would say, okay, I can get behind that, because I never have to worry about bias. I suspect if the BBC is anything like the news in America, and I haven't watched the BBC in a few years, so I don't know, and I don't remember going back, but my bet is that there's plenty of moral language that they employ, in which case I have to ask why in this case are they so hesitant to do so? I
have definitive proof from a Facebook friend posted a screenshot. On BBC, they were having a discussion of whether the Iranian blockade the Israeli blockade can be called a war crime. Is that not? So if a terrorist is a militant, then shouldn't a war crime be, they're equivocating between self-defense and a war crime. That's my point. And calling it a war crime, that is that has just as much moral attachment than saying a terrorist. So yeah, I don't believe them for a second that they follow that principally.
Yeah, I didn't think they would.
Our producer raised the question, well, would the BBC have refused to call the 9/11 attacks as having been orchestrated by terrorists? Would they have refused to use the word terrorist when 9/11 happened?
Yep.
And, I probably not, since the terrorists were not a governing body. Like somehow the fact that Hamas governs that part of Gaza, what makes what they did different? So I'm both appalled and completely unsurprised. I'm appalled that they refuse to be objective in terms of the words they use, but I'm unsurprised by this lack of objectivity from the BBC. They're taking the easy way out. Let's not use words that will make people uncomfortable or angry, and let's call that objectivity.
Yeah, and of course you know, when you report the news, you exercise some editorial control. You have a limited amount of time on a news broadcast. You choose what to report on, how much time to report on it. All that is there's some sort of basis for the decisions you make. As you mentioned with the protests, they decide whether or not to report, to what extent to report. With the blockade, for example, I haven't seen the report, but they decide whether or not to mention that the blockade means involves Israel not allowing the types of goods in to Gaza that were previously used, and are used to fuel the attacks against Israel. When they report about Israel cutting off water and electricity, do they report the fact that it comes from Israel, that Israel actually is lighting the streets for the terrorists on their way to murder Jews? So what goes into to that to those decisions matters, and I think the idea that the BBC is unbiased is, of course, complete bullshit.
And we just had another very generous super chat come in from Phil. Thank you for 20 pounds. It says, well, for those who don't think the subliminal mental connection exists between the anti-human climate catastrophists and end of days religiosity, he says, read the tweets of certain Scottish Green parliamentary members. Well, I would have to look that up. Have no idea, though it would not surprise me. But thank you for the super chat. That's very generous.
Yeah. Thank you, Phil. Thank you to all our super chatters. Any final thoughts from anybody on the panel?
Well, if I get going again, I'll go on another rant. So I'm just going to circle back on the idea that this is about ideas, that not everybody we see do evil, disgusting things is as evil and disgusting as they appear, though some of them are, and that it remains a war in which we've got to engage on changing minds. People say, change hearts and minds. I don't give a rat's ass about your heart, but I do intend to change your mind if you are open to reason. And I've only started talking about this. I am far, far from done.
So, part of what we do on the reality show is we ask people if they have anything to promote. I don't think we always do that, but we will do that now, in part because I have something to promote. So let me ask you guys if there's anything you want the audience to know about anything you do outside of the reality show. Michael?
Just check out my podcast, The Rational Egoist. We have a lot of discussions similar to the ones that we have on this show. You can find it wherever you get podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else.
John?
Just check me out on social media or my website at Was Art. And I'm trying to bring more beauty and positivity to the world to counter all the negative. Something else to put your mind on.
Robert?
Yeah, everything I do, you can find at robertnacer.com. And that's pronounced Nacer. Now, I've been corrected on the pronunciation of that name before. Yes, people have told me how to pronounce my own name. And the reason is it's a Syrian name. I have Syrian blood. Obviously, I'm not very Syrian in that I'm 100% American. I don't care about my heritage. But this is the one time I'm going to stand up and say, as a Syrian American, on behalf of all of the Nacers, and on behalf of everybody else in Syria, in the Levant, in the Middle East, the entire world, the Nacers, I side with Israel. So yeah, robertnaser.com.
I appreciate that. By the way, do you have authority to speak on behalf of all Syrians?
As much authority as anybody else does. Absolutely.
Great. Then we will take that. I will take that on behalf of all Israelis, and appreciate that. And yeah, I was going to say, of course, what I want to promote is Ayn Rand Center UK. But besides being on the channel every day nowadays, one of the things I do to sort of keep whatever's left of my sanity, although it might have the opposite effect, is I'm on Twitter, or X as it's now called, and I'm much more active there, and I do update, although I update with a healthy degree and amount of anger about what's going on. So you can follow me at Rosie Ginsburg on X. We will be back here tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. UK time, 12:30 Eastern for the Daily Objective, and 30 minutes later for the reality show. Thank you all, and thank you to our viewers and our super chatters, and we'll see you tomorrow. Oh, wait. Something else we need to announce is that in 2 hours, we will have Harry Binswanger back for a one-time episode of HBTV on this topic. It's good that I remembered to announce that, because that is a big deal. Hopefully everybody can tune into that. So we will see you then, and then we will see you again tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.